So, gents, have you seen this meme before? So the meme is, they hated Jesus for he spoke the truth. And people often post this underneath tweets that are very unpopular but get a sizable amount of backlash. And the reason I'm referencing this is because Harrison Butker, who's a kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs, I believe, the fellas that just won the Super Bowl fairly recently, he got up at a Catholic university, which you would expect would be on board with his views, and gave a speech about generally Catholic social values, or the kind of opinions that anyone about 50 years ago would have had and not been hated about, and the internet lost its collective blooming mind. So I'm just going to play a little bit of the clip. But the main one that really annoyed them was the fact that he has a happy relationship with his wife. He thanked her for playing a role in his life and said to the women in the audience, maybe don't be girl bosses, because filling out spreadsheets the rest of your life probably won't get you as much fulfillment as, I don't know, family and kids that love you. So I'm just going to go to that link now and play that.
Ladies and gentlemen of the class of 2024, you are sitting at the edge of the rest of your lives. Each of you has the potential to leave a legacy that transcends yourselves and this era of human existence. In the small ways, by living out your vocation, you will ensure that God's church continues and the world is enlightened by your example. For the ladies present today, congratulations on an amazing accomplishment. You should be proud of all that you have achieved to this point in your young lives. I want to speak directly to you briefly because I think it is you, the women, who have had the most diabolical lies told to you. How many of you are sitting here now, about to cross this stage, and are thinking about all the promotions and titles you are going to get in your career? Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world. I can tell you that my beautiful wife, Isabel, would be the first to say that her life truly started when she began living her vocation as a wife and as a mother. I'm on this stage today and able to be the man I am because I have a wife who leans into her vocation. I'm beyond blessed with the many talents God has given me, but it cannot be overstated that all of my success is made possible because a girl I met in band class back in middle school would convert to the faith, become my wife, and embrace one of the most important titles of all, homemaker.
How evil. How could he thank his wife for supporting his career and having children?
So it went down well in the room at the time.
Of course.
But it was the internet that went mad about it.
The internet actually wished death upon him, actually. Here's one tweet, for example. The best part about Harrison Butker being a misogynist psycho is that a lot of dudes can headhunt his stupid kicker backside for a 15-yard penalty next season and get a lifetime of credit with the women in their lives. Basically, hurt him, cripple him on the field and make it look like an accident because he thanked his wife.
He's the kicker as well. They won't have much opportunity to do that. But yeah, it's...
Don't encourage them, Bo.
Right, it should be fine. But yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It's just complete... Who's that? But who cares who that is, actually? Although 4.3 million views. He's got quite a few views there.
8,000
And he was doxed by the city of Kansas, actually, put out his location.
Oh,
yes, quite. So this is the thing you're referring to. So the Kansas City X/Twitter account made a tweet that said that he was it gave out his exact location. Actually, it said, just a reminder that Harrison Butker lives in the city of Lee Summit. So just saying, oh, but by the way, just so you know, he's here. So if you want to go hunting, like you did for the Supreme Court justices when they were the Dobbs decision got leaked and they were going to overturn Roe v. Wade, and people showed up outside Brett Kavanaugh's house with a knife and rope ready to abduct him. If you want to do that, you can definitely go and do that. That's obviously what they're insinuating. It's evil, so they put his life at risk. So since the Missouri Attorney General has said that they'll be looking into this, he accused the city officials of doxing Butker, and he said, my office is demanding accountability after they doxed Butker last night for daring to express his religious beliefs. I will enforce the Missouri Human Rights Act to ensure Missourians are not targeted for their free exercise of religion. Stay tuned. The city's mayor came out to defend the account, right? And he said, this is Quinton Lucas, and he said, the post was clearly inappropriate for a public account, but the city has correctly apologized for the error, and I will review account access and ensure nothing like it is shared from future public channels. And they put out a tweet basically groveling, knowing that they'd done wrong because they'd let the intern have the reins, and just said, we apologize for our previous tweet. It's shared in error. Oh, was it an error?
Yeah,
really?
Yeah. And it's too late now. The other thing is, he's saying he's not saying anything even close to controversial. So it's like, I get that if like a Supreme Court justice or someone like Tucker Carlson, people turned up at Tucker's house one time, didn't they? Do you remember that? Not that I'm condoning it, farthest thing from it, but they are a political thing. So on some level, it makes sense that you'd have political enemies. Okay, this is an American football player who said he's got a wife and family. Like,
he's encouraging men to be responsible. He's talking about parenthood and the importance of having, two parents in a family. Yeah. Everything about that was positive. Contrast that with, you have students destroying artworks on campus. You've got professors talking about abolishing whiteness and white lives don't matter. No retribution, no kickback by the media lovies. And yet we have this. And, all I saw when I saw all this was like, feminists are all pro-choice, except when it comes to a woman's right to choose whether to stay home or go to work. That's the one choice that they're not allowed to have in this world, Are
you familiar with when Simone de Beauvoir was debating Betty Friedan in the 1960s? Simone de Beauvoir, the architect of modern feminism, who wrote The Second Sex, that they call the feminist Bible, delusional, predatory woman. Betty Friedan said, well, we should give women the choice to be stay-at-home mothers or to go out and have careers. And Simone de Beauvoir said, no, we need to take away the choice of homemaker from women because too many women will choose it. So it's never about choice. It's, in fact, socially engineering women to be contemptible of the men and children in their lives, which I think is fundamentally evil considering most women want children, and instead telling them that you should be very happy endlessly filling out spreadsheets for some corporate boss who could instantly replace you at the drop of a hat. It's telling women lies. And he's saying, well, the woman in my life that loves me very much. She's added immeasurably to my career. We love each other, and I hope that you get the same thing. It's wishing success on those people. But I think the most resentful people that are always on the internet, that don't have someone around them to love them, to say, oh, darling, can you put the phone down and actually spend some time with me, are the ones that are most vocal about this, because he's essentially reminding them that their conscience is constantly nagging at them for all the bad choices they chose in life, and that other people just can't affirm your bad lifestyle decisions away.
It's interesting you've got Stefan Molyneux on, because he was one of the first people I saw that had just explicitly said that all this stuff is a slippery slope towards genocide, actually. That an attack on the very concept of the family, or women having children, is having children at all, is just one element in the
extinction of the human race.
Yeah, to get rid of them ultimately and for all time. So yeah, I mean, obviously you say as a Catholic, that guy, or as Christian or whatever, you don't even necessarily need that. Any normal human beings, you have to have a relationship and have kids. I mean, it's not controversial.
I mean, all the women, most of the women I know, I should say, stay at home, are housewives. Most of them are Catholic, but not all of them. But they're all erudite, highly educated. Many of them are Oxbridge graduates. I mean, the thing is that the reality is most women, I think, in this country who are going out to work are just making enough money to pay for the childcare, which I've never understood. Why not just stay home and look after the children rather than go out to pay somebody else to look after the children? And yes, there are some very determined women who want to become CEO, board directors and so forth. But the personality traits that make you into that sort of a person are very few and far between, shared amongst very few men, let alone women. Most women don't want to go through that. I mean, Jordan Peterson talks about all of this, doesn't he? They're not interested in all that. They have other priorities in life. And yet it's a desire, as you say, of the feminists to cut that off. And these are the same liberals who are supporting Hamas, which insists that women stay at home.
Well, also, all the women that I know, as you said, are the women who either have kids or are going to have kids already, who are very learned and make positive contributions to the discourse on our side of the aisle and are known for their work rather than just being essentially pretty talking heads. It's like Mary Harrington, Louise Perry, Emma Webb over at the New Culture Forum. They have fantastic morals. They are excellent commentators and writers, and they wouldn't object to this because they're psychologically sane and don't have a pathological hatred of men that obviously isn't serving their own interest.
Talks about Simone de Beauvoir. There's Susan Sontag, who talks about how there's no such thing as consensual sex, even in marriage, between men and women. It's just completely crazy.
Simone de Beauvoir said all heterosexual sex is a kind of rape. That is an exact quote.
Yeah, Susan Sontag was of the same sort of stripe. Yeah, I know. A lot of women I've known, when they're very young, say things like, oh, I don't think I want kids, I want a career. And then they get into their mid to late 20s or early 30s and are suddenly terribly upset that they don't have children, and then very quickly have some children. Like that over and over and over and over again. So to try and tell women that there's something wrong with that is pure evil, just pure evil. Or there's something wrong with the idea of a man wanting a wife or anything like that. It's just completely insane and evil.
Well, misery loves company, and so they want to make it the,
Right.
the general standard. I mean, just before I move on to a next element of this story, I mean, the important part there is that most women in the UK, 50.2%, I think it's ticked up slightly, have reached 30 and had no children. But as demographer Stephen Shaw, that I've had on the show many times, has shown through his research, 30 is the sort of fulcrum age where both men and women, if they don't have children by that age, there's a coin toss, 50% odds if they'll ever have children. So of those half of women in the UK that are now 30 and childless, half of those will never have kids. So 25% of women in the UK will have never had kids, but have wanted them, because the vast majority of them actually want them. So he's right. The lie that we're telling to women that you're going to be some CEO girl boss, when these are very hyper-competitive, very scarce positions that most people don't want to do, men and women. The idea that that's going to be meaningful in your life when you're not going to get that, but that you're also not going to have kids, which is going to be very meaningful, you're confiscating that from them. You're inflicting tragedy on people for 40 years. That's utterly abhorrent.
Also, I've just noticed they actually failed to write that correctly. We apologies for our previous tweet.
They got a diversity hire to correct the mistakes of the obvious resentful diversity hire before. I mean, what's interesting as well, like the press kicked into overdrive to try and inflate the condemnation from within the Catholic camp. So if you read this headline here, right, this is from NPR, so state-funded outlet in the States. Benedictine College nuns denounce Harrison Butker's speech at their school. Now, why would the nuns denounce it, do you
The
think?
nuns.
Yes, that's what they're claiming. The nuns apparently denounced his speech. Now, why do you think the nuns could possibly denounce a speech? Do you think they would be against women having family in that? Because that's obviously what you meant to read in the headline, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know. Why would they?
They're not the nuns I'm familiar with from my growing up in school. They were the Praetorian Guard of papal enforcement, you know? I mean,
Exactly. So
a
his
phalanx of nuns would even make a bishop tremble, you know?
their main complaint is that he said that for most of the women in the room, their primary status would be as a homemaker. And they said he should have had the stipulation of, but the women who choose not to do that have an equally valid vocational life, which is a fair stipulation, but the majority of women are not going to go into nunnery either. And obviously NPR are trying to manipulate this into saying, well, even the Catholics are throwing him under the bus. This is terrible, isn't it? It's like, no, not against people having kids, you pathological lunatics. Right.
And it is Benedictine, though. So.
Well, Jesuits are the worst, you know, that's fine. So after all that, there was another interesting element that people lost their mind over, and this is the other element that I wanted to bring in here, and that is the sort of Christian/Catholic revival that's underway, particularly among the intellectual sphere at the moment. And so he spoke in here. This is a really interesting discussion, basically about why he started going to church and taking his kids to church and the like, and why he thinks that even after they leave the Catholic college, they should do the same. And it's just a quick clip.
It is only in the past few years that I have grown encouraged to speak more boldly and directly, because as I mentioned earlier, I have leaned into my vocation as a husband and father, and as a man. To the gentlemen here today, part of what plagues our society is this lie that has been told to you that men are not necessary in the home or in our communities. As men, we set the tone of the culture, and when that is absent, disorder, dysfunction, and chaos set in. This absence of men in the home is what plays a large role in the violence we see all around the nation. Other countries do not have nearly the same absentee father rates as we find here in the US, and a correlation could be made in their drastically lower violence rates as well. Be unapologetic in your masculinity, fighting against the cultural emasculation of men. Do hard things. Never settle for what is easy. You might have a talent that you don't necessarily enjoy, but if it glorifies God, maybe you should lean into that over something that you might think suits you better. I speak from experience as an introvert, who now finds myself as an amateur public speaker and an entrepreneur, something I never thought I'd be when I received my industrial engineering degree. The road ahead is bright. Things are changing, society is shifting, and people, young and old, are embracing tradition. Not only has it been my vocation that has helped me and those closest to me, but not surprising to many of you, should be my outspoken embrace of the traditional Latin Mass. I've been very vocal in my love and devotion to the TLM and its necessity for our lives. But what I think gets misunderstood is that people who attend the TLM do so out of pride or preference. I can speak to my own experience, but for most people I have come across within these communities, this simply is not true. I do not attend the TLM because I think I am better than others, or for the smells and bells, or even for the love of Latin. I attend the TLM because I believe, just as the God of the Old Testament was pretty particular in how he wanted to be worshiped, the same holds true for us today. It is through the TLM that I encountered order and began to pursue it in my own life.
So I think there's an excellent exaltation of what masculine, self-confident headship, taking on duty does, and why you should revere tradition. I think that's why a lot of young men in the US, particularly on Capitol Hill and the like, and in the UK, are gravitating towards, if they're adopting Christianity, either Orthodox or some of the more traditional Catholic communities. And when we constantly talk about a deficit of male role models, right? Not knowing what men should do, how they should be if the fathers aren't in the home, and they've gravitated towards figures like the ever-ending spectre of Andrew Tate, who used to sell porn, great role model. Like, this guy who's...
Did he?
Yeah, he ran a canning business. That's how he got all his money. So selling men...
Maybe I have heard that.
Selling men the instrument of their own immiseration. Great role model. But this guy, you know, married, husband, father.
What's TLM? Traditional Latin Mass? Is
Yes.
that what that means? Okay, right.
Yes.
Tridentine.
Yeah, he's a Super Bowl champion. Even though he tears up at the podium, nobody looks down on him for it. I mean, great role model, and yet the internet loses its collective mind at it.
Yeah, I think this is a great role model, actually. And I didn't hear this part of the speech before, and I think it's wonderful. And he's quite right, and you're quite right. You know, the reason that the Tridentine Mass, the Latin Mass, is becoming more popular is because it provides people with a historical grounding. That post-Vatican II, you know, Pope John the 23rd said, let's open the windows and let in some fresh air. Well, unfortunately, out the window also flew those things that make a religion robust. You know, that's why the Catholic Church is the only one that's thriving, the Orthodox and Islam, because they actually stand for something. And the post-Vatican II Catholic Church and the C of E have tried to be all things to all people. And once you try to do that, then actually you don't have a religion at all. And the Tridentine Mass, the TLM, I think appeals to people because of that historical continuity. But also I think there's an act of rebellion by people who are joining it, because they're rebelling against the woke orthodoxy. And by joining something like that, I think it makes them feel as if they are actually doing what they can to push back against the madness. And also, I think it's a great way to build a new community and meet like-minded people, because you're more guaranteed to find people of a similar mindset at a Tridentine Mass than you are going to in a normal Mass, I would imagine.
Are you Catholic?
I'm Catholic raised, yeah.
Okay.
In fact, you know, Candace Owen was converted in my parish church,
right.
Father Julian.
Oh, really? There you go. Well, that's quite funny, actually. So we can contrast those two things. So in response to this section of the speech, you've got sort of like anti-woke self-described liberals like IO, which is a account that posts data on like FBI crime statistic hate facts, for example, that Elon Musk keeps replying to. But this fellow said, devotion to the Latin Mass is associated with right-wing extremism, anti-Semitism, and some of the worst cultural reactionaries in the world. Deservedly ratioed for that. And I just wanted to remind you that some people in the anti-woke coalition were going to have a real problem going forward, because they actually hate the traditionalist right more than they do the left. They just see...
What's his angle then to say that?
Basically, he thinks that the left are a problem because the left are going to lead to the far right, and that's going to be way worse. It's not that the left in and of themselves are a civilizational acid.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Whereas the opposite is, okay, people that are in the anti-woke camp, well, as you said, Candace Owens, gravitating towards tradition. She's just converted to being a Catholic.
Yes, Father Julian.
Yeah, quite. Tammy Peterson as well. Jordan Peterson keeps getting asked whether or not he'll be a Christian, convert. He was just on Pints with Aquinas, which was a Catholic podcast the other day. So, and then also, and this is very strange, so I'm not sure what's going on here, but Bear Grylls helping Russell Brand get baptised in the Thames.
Yeah, no one's quite sure what denomination Russell
me
Brand
neither.
has become, because it's not quite clear there, although his wife's a Catholic. I have to say, you know, I'm not quite convinced about all of these sudden discovery, these Damascene conversions that we're having. I mean, I don't want to... Anyone who wants to come to the church, I think, is great. The more full they are, the more people are who are on side fighting the good fight, the better. But I just sort of wonder whether much of this is actually a fad. You know, it's like sort of the right-wing version of people on the left becoming Buddhists. And, you know, Russell Brand used to be a Buddhist too. And I don't doubt, you know, obviously for many people it's because they see the church as the moral foundation of Western civilization, which I applaud and understand, and they want to defend or support that. But I think that's more of a political and ideological decision rather than one based on faith. And I'm really curious whether Russell Brand and Candace Owens, do they believe in the resurrection and the ascension? Do they believe in transubstantiation, when the bread and the wine become the body and blood of Christ? You know, do they believe in the Immaculate Conception, that Mary was a virgin? Do they believe in the Holy Trinity? Do they go to confession? Do they believe in redemption? That's what I'm really curious about, and I'm not sure that I'm convinced yet by that.
And even though I'm completely up against it with you two, I must say a word that someone like Luther or Calvin might have said about the Latin Mass is that it was used for centuries to bamboozle unlettered people. There was a reason why Protestantism actively decided to do away with it. I mean, if you don't know Latin, it's like going to the opera and it's in Italian or something, and you don't understand a word, and it's sort of performative. You're going to the opera because it's a thing to do. You don't actually understand it. That for centuries, many people would go to Mass, not understand a word of Latin, and so it's a bit odd to me. Like, why not?
There are benefits for translating into the native language. Like I do actually go to a Novus Ordo service because my priest actually watches the show because he's a very good chap. But one of the main problems with the Protestant Reformation, I don't think it was necessarily Luther's intention, because Luther was a reformist, not an abolitionist, but was that it devolved the interpretation of Scripture away from a legitimate hierarchy of apostolic succession to whoever the priest or youth pastor, the preacher or youth pastor is at the time, and now you get all of these aberrations in the Church of England.
It can and very quickly lead to anarchy and chaos and German armies marching on Rome. Yeah, yeah, but the opposite is that can you trust that ecclesiastical structure to be? Because someone like Luther or Calvin would say, yeah, the popes and the cardinals themselves were corrupt.
Yeah, and certainly still is. There is fallibility. Definitely.
But, Evelyn Waugh said in the 60s, though, that by attending a Tridentine Mass, you are celebrating in the same Mass as Thomas à Becket, as St. Thomas More. It unites all Catholics in that shared thing.
Sure.
And the last one I wanted to mention as well is, as you said, in the utilitarian fashion, but I think people are coming round to it just because it's the moral foundation. Someone that you both might have opinions on or familiar with the work of is Tom Holland. Now, so Tom Holland actually had bowel cancer a couple of years ago. Yeah. And in this article in The Spectator, it basically details how he went back to St. Bartholomew's, which was a site of one of the apparitions of Mary. Sorry. And he prayed for the first time since he was a child. And he's now, after writing Dominion as well, understanding Christianity as a unique moral revolution in all of mankind, got off his atheist perch and is now questioning. I mean, we've got Ayaan Hirsi Ali recently, who was the mistress of the Four Horsemen of New Atheism, who has now converted to being Christian. And some people are saying, including Carl, is this just a sort of utilitarian conversion? But she's also spoken privately about having what she believes to be a sincere religious experience. So I just think something's definitely happening here. I don't know to what degree it will keep catching on.
It's the counterculture. Where in the 60s, let's say, or sort of the beatniks of the 50s, the hippies of the 60s and 70s, the counterculture then was against tradition, or let's say. Well, now the mainstream, or for a while, has been wokeism or extreme leftism or globalism or whatever you want to call it. And so now the counterculture to that is tradition again.
Precisely.
Embracing religion and all sorts of things like that. The avant-garde is the right and religion and things like that. Now, but that's the way culture goes, right?
But the more the merrier, whoever wants to support it. Like Churchill said, I'm like a flying buttress. I support the church from the outside, and the more we want to come and support the foundations of Christian civilization, the better.
As long as the converts aren't leading the congregation, I think that'll work great. So just a final word on it then. Arison Butker, he said absolutely nothing wrong. They hated him because he spoke the truth. And if we get more men like him acting as ambassadors for being a husband, being the head of his community and reviving tradition, brilliant. Culture will be a lot healthier.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast to the Lotus Eaters. And if you want to see more of what we're up to, you can check out Common Sense Crusade, Calvin Robinson series on our website. And if you want to see what we're doing more generally, you can also follow us on Twitter.